Hannah Beth too. Did she leave? Moving on to the Department of Education.
This is an item that was put forward by the legislature. I will just note that we did adopted $1.3 billion last year towards the Common Core, support of the Common Core implementation, which is happening now and doing a lot of field testing right now related to the Smarter Balance testing and getting a lot of really positive feedback from the field. So good reports on that.
Very good. LAO?
Edgar Cabral with the LAO. I think I'd just like to point out that the governor had a proposal to provide $26.7 million for funding for the K-12 high-speed network to provide some to do an assessment of the needs of school districts and provide additional funding for districts that needed improved infrastructure to be able to administer the exams online. The staff recommendation to provide $550 million does, of that $550 million, there would be $26.7 million that would go out according to the governor's proposal.
Thank you. Colleagues, any questions? Public comment? On page 16.
Yes. Mr. Chair, members, Bernie Orozco with the California Cable and Telecommunications Association. In regards to that $26.7 million augmentation for internet connectivity projects in the community, there's some associated budget bill language that goes with that augmentation. And that budget bill language, we support the augmentation, the cable industry does, but we would suggest that the legislature consider amending that language to give clearer guidance to exactly what it is in that assessment that you want to do. Working with the K-12 high-speed network folks who have done some assessments on those projects, they've identified about 40% of the public schools that they believe do not meet the adequate bandwidth today to provide the proper testing. We would probably challenge that and say that we are probably out there in those communities, and if those options were to look at existing infrastructure, you wouldn't have to build your way out of a new network. So we just would strongly urge you to take a look at that language, provide some clearer guidance to what the outcomes of what your targets and what is adequate bandwidth. So thank you.
Thank you.
Nate Mack with the Association of California School Administrators. We certainly support the governor's $26 million for the high-speed network. However, we would say that the Senate's proposal of $500 million for the implementation of Common Core is a little too low. Last year, the Department of Education estimated that it would take about $3 billion or so to implement Common Core. We'd ask for you to revisit this item and raise the amount to at least where we were last year of the $1.25 billion. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello, Leilani Aguinaldo-Yee on behalf of the Los Angeles Unified School District. We do appreciate the Senate proposal for throwing money back in for additional funding for the Common Core implementation. We do ask, however, that you replicate the criteria used in last year's block grant. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Andrea Ball, California School Boards Association. We appreciate the $550 million. We too think that the amount should go up to what it was at least last year, $1.25 billion. That's what the Assembly has put in. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good afternoon. Marta Alvarez with San Diego Unified School District. We appreciate the Senate proposal of the augmentation for, not LCF, but for Common Core. One suggestion we have is to add a clause in the Charter Bill language regarding any flexibility for school districts that may have pre-invested in not LCF, but in Common Core, so that some of our districts may have done early investments, and maybe we have to repay ourselves back for those investments. Thank you.
Thank you.
Liz Guillen with Public Advocates. Thank you very much for the recommendation to augment for Common Core. We agree that it should be limited in the same way that last year's grant was. And we suggest that there be requirements to report sooner from the state how these funds are being used. Thank you.
Thank you. Senator Jackson.
Yes, given the fact that just a week ago there wasn't anything put in there for this, and we put about $500 million additional dollars, I'd be interested to know why what is being done that would take up another $550 million to prepare for Common Core? It just, we did $1.26 billion last year, and now we're adding another $550 million, I think it is, and I'm just wondering where that money is going. What are the requirements that take that kind of money? Not necessarily challenging it, but just curious, because that seems like a pretty substantial amount of money. So it'd be helpful to know where that money is going and why you need another $1.2 billion.
Leo, you want to address why we put in as much as we did last year, what the outstanding needs still are? I think we spent a lot on technology in the initial augmentation for Common Core. I think, and I was going to ask Ms. Bosler, clearly we're all committed to making sure it succeeds. What the needs still are out there.
Sure, and I think it's been difficult to develop a good statewide estimate of what those needs are, but I think there are three main areas where there's been that need identified. First is in terms of technology. These new tests, unlike our previous tests, are intended to be taken on the computer, and they are intended to be computer adaptive, which means that everybody doesn't take the exact same test. If a student gets answers correct or incorrect, it provides a different question. And in order to be able to do that, you need to have internet access in real time while you're taking the test. So it's ensuring that there's technology to administer the test on the computer, and also that there is the network capabilities to connect to the internet. Then there's professional development for training teachers on the new standards, and providing them with the ability to sort of change their lesson plans and adapt their curriculum to the new standards. And then finally, instructional materials, finding new materials that are aligned to the standards and using those. So those are the three main areas. I think there has been a difficulty in providing some solid cost estimates, and right now there was $1.25 billion provided last year. There are reporting requirements, but those are going to be, districts are going to report on that after the 2 years that they had to spend the money. So we will get that not till another more than a year from now. So right now, at this point, it's hard to get a sense of exactly what the additional need is after the 1.25.
So, Mr. Chairman,
Please.
Internet, professional development, new materials.
That's right.
How much, do you know what we've spent so far on internet? Is it internet access for all our schools, or what does that include, and how much has it cost so far, and how much more do we anticipate those costs to be?
So we don't have any specific data on how much school districts have spent yet. We do the 1.25 billion that was provided, and the language just said you have to spend it on one of these three areas related to the implementation of Common Core. It didn't require that the funds be spent for one or the other. So districts have made different decisions about what they think are most important. From what we have heard, it seems like instructional materials, in part because we still haven't completely adopted a whole new set of materials for Common Core. That's been a little bit less of what districts have spent, and it's been more on the technology and on professional development. But we don't have any kind of specific data yet on how those funds are being spent.
Go ahead. Just one last question. So we're throwing $550 million in there just as is that what we think it might be, or what we've been told it might be, or, is there any documentation that says that actually $550 million is enough? I mean, we've heard people come and say they need another 1.2. What do we know to either support that position or support this position of 550, or, let's see, the Senate is 550, but I don't know where the governor was on this, but the governor is where on this?
So we supported the significant augmentation last year. There's no additional money targeted for Common Core specifically, but I would point out that the LCFF we're putting about $4.5 billion in the implementation of that. And these issues, professional development, instructional materials, they are part of a school district's base operating costs. Also, there's $5.5 billion in the governor's proposal that will be general purpose revenues related to the buying out the remaining deferrals. So those are also monies that could be used by school districts to support these important issues as we implement Common Core.
Senator Jackson, we've got someone from the Department of Education here.
Oh, great.
Might be able to help answer some of your questions.
Good afternoon.
Please.
Thank you. Good afternoon. Monique Ramos from the Department of Education. So last year we developed a cost estimate that estimated it would be about $3.1 billion in order to implement the Common Core standards for the development, the instructional materials, and then the technology in the sense mostly of devices. The additional $26.7 million that the governor has proposed is more about connectivity to that last mile stretch. So last year the legislature allocated $1.25 billion. Districts have been spending those dollars. As the LAO has pointed out, the reports are not due back to the department until next year. But we've heard pretty loud and clear from the field that they could use another infusion of cash. They've been in the field test. I'm sorry?
I said, couldn't we all? But I mean,
Very true.
okay. So they could use some more money for this purpose. I hear the Department of Finance saying that the money will be there, just in a sort of unallocated way.
I think our approach generally, and this is over the last few years, especially last year with the implementation of the LCFF, is really to maximize the general purpose revenues that school districts have access to, so that at the local school board level, they're making allocations for different efforts, including professional development, that are appropriate for their local situation.
And I understand that, but I'm wondering, since we don't know where the money has been spent, we don't know how much money they've needed. So is this a guess of $550 million?
Well, as was mentioned by the department, that their estimate of the need
Was
to implement,
3.1, right.
and this is specific to Common Core, which is beyond, in my view, beyond the infusion of many billions of dollars for LCFF, which is just to get us out of the bottom of states in our per pupil spending. This is an additional big project on top of that.
So I guess not only do we have sort of a different philosophical perspective on this from the governor's office through the legislature, the dollar amount is what I'm interested in, whether the 550 is actually enough, because we've heard them say that they think they could use more, or whether the money is being allocated in ways that we didn't anticipate, so that, you know, we're either spending too much or we're not spending what you estimated, the $3.1 billion. Do you have any idea whether the way the money is being spent is consistent with what your estimates were?
So we've received no formal feedback. What we have heard from the field anecdotally is that the money they have received they have been spending it. And that what we anticipate is need for more, because we've just finished the field test. So they've just experienced this field test, and I think we'll have an even greater sense of what they may need to be successful next year in order to prepare for the actual assessment.
I guess my concern is I just feel like we're operating a little blind.
Senator, we have our resident education expert here. We might turn to Senator Block for a second.
Yeah, I just want to say we did vet this in multiple sub-1 meetings. The issue, clearly there's a need for, I think the $3.1 billion the Department of Education estimates is need to fully implement Common Core preparation is probably in the ballpark. Nobody knows to the dime, probably in the ballpark. No question the $1.25 billion was a good starting amount. No question that schools will need more than what we're allocating this year. We don't have it. So I think the $55 million is a really good move toward complete allocation. The Assembly is allocating more. I'm not sure where they're getting the money. I think in consultation we'll be deciding what is the right amount for now. And by the way, districts have differentially prepared for Common Core. In San Diego, for example, San Diego Unified would rather have flexibility with the money and be able to use it for non-Common Core expenses, because they were very technologically prepared due to bond measures prior to the Common Core. So I think this is a good amount for right now.
Thank you.
Senator Roth.
Just a quick question. I'm just curious, what percentage of the money that was appropriated last year for Common Core was spent on labor costs? You call it something else, career development?
Professional development.
Professional development.
We won't have that information until June of next year.
And what sort of controls are put on it? I mean, do we just funnel the money out and they spend it for whatever they want to spend it, and then we get some data back and we find out it's 90% or 70% or 50%?
So local districts had the choice about how to spend the dollars between the three pots. And they have to report back to the department as of June of next year, and it's subject to the audit guide. So they will be audited to confirm that they appropriately spent those dollars within those three activities.
So districts that are very efficient and effective and can do the training in a minimal amount of hours would then have the money available to spend on technology and whatever the other pod was that you spoke about.
Correct.
Okay, interesting. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Roth. Thank you for your good question, Senator Jackson. Senator Block, for your explanation. Any other questions? Senator Nielsen.
Yes, Mr. Chairman. Thank you. The argumentation is based on the higher projections, I believe, of what may or may not materialize. And Prop 30 promised that we were going to improve public education. I don't think that has happened. We've actually gone backwards, getting rid of some of the reforms that we had previously put into place. Common Core has its fans and its detractors. It at least has to be acknowledged that Common Core is evolving, developing by the day, and we're not really sure what it is. That is my major reservation, that again, yet this be a hollow promise to public education. Prop 30 sunsets, then what's going to happen? We've raised expectations, and we may be investing where we shouldn't be.
Thank you, Senator Nielsen. No public comment on this. We have a motion by Senator Block. The motion would be to approve the $550 million in support for local educational agencies for the furtherance of the implementation of Common Core, and that would be inclusive, as was mentioned by the LAO, of the $26.7 million for the high-speed network proposal, and then also for trailer bill language addressing the additional funding. Call the roll, please.
Leno?
Aye.
Nielsen?
No.
Anderson? No. Bell?
Aye.
Berryhill? Block?
Aye.
Corbett? Aye. Hancock? Aye. Jackson? Blue? Mitchell? Aye. Monning? Aye. Morell? Roth?
Aye.
Torres? Wyland?
Jackson, aye.
Jackson, aye. 9-2.
The motion passes 9-2. And colleagues, we're going to just turn back to page 15 for a second. If you could call the absent members, please.
Berryhill? Jackson?
Aye.
Blue? Morell? Torres? Wyland? 8-2.
Who did we miss?
I'm sorry, excuse me, Mitchell.
Oh, aye.
9-2.
Thank you. The measure passes 9-2. Page 17, staying with the Department of Education.
So this is also another proposal from the legislature building on a proposal that was included in last year's budget related to one-time money for local, for competitive grants for technical, career tech and career pathways.
Thank you. Clearly, an issue that we have been engaged in as a Senate. We went to Long Beach last year and had a very successful day. Senators from both Democratic and Republican caucus, and I think we were all dazzled by not only the fact of the Long Beach Promise, but also how it's impacting their students and making sure that students as early as the middle school years are beginning to focus on what their interests are. And how we get them on a path to gather the educational experience they need to be able to engage in a career. And so we did put we had $250 million last year. This is a proposal for another $300 million. Elio, you want to talk to us about it?
Paul Steenhausen with the Analyst's Office. Yes, the 2013-14 budget package has the $250 million. It's one-time money. It's designed to improve and expand collaboration among community colleges, K-12 schools, and industry. The California Department of Education, which administers the program, received more than 100 applications. These are from consortia of schools and community colleges. And the CDE is currently reviewing and scoring the applications for that $250 million in grants that are going to be given out.
So I understand that the 100 applications represents about 3 times the original $250 million. Is that accurate?
123 applications, totals about $700 million in funding requests.
$700 million.
In funding requests, that's right.
So with the 250 from last year, the proposal here for another 300, that would get us about 2/3 of the way to what the need and application represents.
That's right, at least what was requested by the consortia.
Right. Okay. Any questions? Yes, Senator Roth.
How would you evaluate overall the quality of the applications you received? Part 1 and Part 2, are you going back to the field with some suggestions, some generic suggestions? I realize it's a competitive process, but some generic suggestions as to how districts and county offices can improve the quality of the applications submitted in future rounds?
So the applications went into the California Department of Education in late March, early April. We at the Analyst's Office have not seen those applications, although we are really interested to see what the quality looks like. The department, in creating this competitive grant, have created a rubric and with points assigned to the answers that the applicants give to various questions, like their need and the extent to which industry is going to be involved in the collaboration. And so once that's released, that's something we will be taking a look at.
Have you had a chance to take a look at the rubric itself? And do you have a position as to whether that rubric, that game plan that the department has developed, accomplishes the objective that the legislature had, linked learning and career tech and all of that, in putting together this Career Pathways Trust?
Yes, we have looked at the rubric, and overall think it's pretty well done in capturing what the legislature really values, which are high schools and community colleges creating coherent sequences of coursework, of curriculum for students from high school to community colleges, as well as the high schools themselves rethinking how they teach career technical education and academics, and bring in a work-based component so that students are more engaged in their education.
And one final question. Is there a timeline for the announcement of the first round? Maybe you mentioned it and I missed it.
Actually, today was supposed to be the deadline for CDE to announce the winners. Just yesterday, the day before, CDE announced due to the volume of applications, it was going to take some additional time. I don't believe CDE is given a revised timeline, though, on when they're going to announce the winners, the recipient who's going to receive the money.
Mr. Ramos, do you have anything to add for us?
Sorry. So the department does anticipate awarding the grants next week, probably later toward the week. And just in a sense of quality, we actually felt that the quality of their applications were good and the process went quite well.
Yes, Senator Money.
Just a quick related question. If this second round of grant opportunities is made available, will there be preference given to those that did not receive grants in the first round, or would it not be structured in that fashion?
So we could definitely have that conversation about how to structure. This is a new pot of money, and whether the legislature wanted to give priority to those who had already applied or to other considerations, we'd be happy to have those conversations.
Thank you.
Well,
Senator Roth.
Well, whether or not it's priority, I mean, I guess there is a question. Does a district or a county office have to go through the process of putting together another application if in fact the content of the application is going to be the same, or are you going to simply take those unsuccessful applications, put them back in the pool, rescore them with those additional ones that you get, and then, I mean, I think that deserves some consideration, because in this time of meager resources, even though we're talking billions, to put a district or a county office through the process of submitting another application when they've already done one probably is unnecessary work. So
Senator Roth, that's a very important point, and that's the kind of detail that would be in the trailer bill language.
And when?
Thank you. I had one last question for you, Mr. Ramos. How successful were we in engaging the business community? Because that's so much a part of the success of this concept.
It seemed like we were very impressive in engaging the business community. We saw some chambers participate, regional areas. There's some really impressive applications out there.
Good to hear. All right. Senator Block has a motion then to approve the $300 million, which is one-time Prop 98 funding for this second round of funding for the Career Pathways Trust for the 14-15 budget year, and then also adopt a related placeholder trailer bill language. Call the roll, please.
Leno.
Aye.
Nielsen. Anderson. Bell. Berryhill. Block. Corbett. Hancock. Jackson. Blue. Mitchell. Monning. Morrell. Roth. Torres. Wyland.
10-0.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes. Senator Nielsen.
Mr. Chairman, excuse me, I was distracted by staff. I want to make a comment on this one. This is one of my greatest heartburns in the whole doggone budget. Career Tech is very dear to my heart. I carried major legislation for CTE. And I do have overall concerns with the budget, and I've voiced those today. I'm not going to reiterate them. I'm abstaining because of how important this is to me and how high a priority. But I want to reserve my vote on this for the conference committee and to take a look at it at that time. But candidly, this is one of the hardest abstentions I've ever had to deal with.
We appreciate your always thoughtful deliberation. So that will pass 10-0. Colleagues, thank you for your patience. We are making real progress here. On to page 18. Local control funding formula.
Yes, last year, really one of the more significant pieces of legislation that the legislature approved was the local control funding formula, which is really a paradigm shift in the way we fund our schools, and really giving much more authority and flexibility to the locals to really design programs that best meet the needs of their local communities, and also to allocate funding on a much more rational basis based on the students that are being served in those school districts that are both low income and English language learners, as well as foster youth. So this is an important piece of the governor's budget. We did propose $4.5 billion in funding for the local control funding formula to eliminate about 28% of the remaining funding gap to get towards those targets that were set forth in the legislation. And there's an additional proposal here, and I would just say that we really are not going to be supportive of anything that undermines the local control funding formula. And I see this now as it's an additional money, but I think we'll have the LAO present the proposal.
Thank you.
Carolyn Chu with the LAO. So the proposal before you would add an additional $330 million to LCFF implementation funding above what the governor would add. So it would go up to a total of $4.8 billion. In addition, of that $330 million, $29 million would go towards homeschool transportation equalization. It would be potentially the first of 7 installments towards equalizing home-to-school funding. And then $150 million of the $330 would be for accelerating a component of the formula. Specifically, it would accelerate the funding for the high school add-on. If you'll recall, there was a 2.6% add-on to the high school rate, which was intended to go towards career technical education and college readiness courses, but that money is not actually required in any way to go towards that activity.
Ms. Bossler, I had one question for you. You had used the word undermined. So we're trying to augment by $330 million what you're already proposing in additional support for LCFF. How would that additional 330 in any way undermine?
So I think the spirit of local control funding formula is really just that, the local control and general purpose revenues. And this would be, it looks to me like, and I guess the devil is in the details, so I don't have the full proposal in front of us, but it looks like there's some spirit of creating new categoricals within the LCFF pot. I think that's something that would be of concern to me, and I have my 2 colleagues here who are much more expert than I on this subject. So.
Sure. Thank you. Thomas Todd, Finance. So I think what Ms. Bossler was alluding to is that you're investing $300 million more in the local control funding formula, and so I think the administration sort of appreciates that, but that is a direct result of the fact that you're adopting higher revenues. So setting that issue aside, right, absolutely. So setting that issue aside, to the extent that you begin to accelerate, any of the components of the local control funding formula, in this case, accelerating a CTE component within this formula comes at the expense of something. And what it comes at the expense of within the local control funding formula is base grant funding. And so I think we view that as, a reduction in the flexibility that locals would have otherwise within the construct of the formula.
Leo, do you have a thought on this?
Well, at least to date, there's no restrictions. Currently, there are no restrictions on the CTE add-on monies. Now, it's certainly possible that trailer bill language could be adopted to dedicate that funding or require that funding to be spent on CTE. That would put further restrictions. But right now, the CTE add-on is general purpose funding to districts.
Senator Block.
Yeah, I just want to point out that while career technical education, depending on how it is actually construed in detail, could be seen as an additional categorical. Home-to-school transportation is one that the governor already decided to leave in there, and this just makes the home-to-school transportation distribution more reasonable and equitable. The other important thing to point out is while this does give $330 million more to school districts under Prop 98, which nobody questions they could use anyway, but particularly this year when the governor in the May revise came up with a surprise obligation for school districts under STRS. And we all applaud the governor for recognizing the need to repay our debts, and certainly a STRS repayment is important. But school districts back in January weren't told they would have this extra obligation. So those school districts that do a good job, those boards have been meeting and planning and meeting with parents and other stakeholder groups. And now when they've got just about their plans ready for a July 1st fiscal year, just around the corner, they suddenly have this additional obligation. So the other $330 million, a large part of that will offset much of that obligation. So it's truly necessary.
Thank you, Senator Block. And I'm just going to underscore something you had said earlier, Ms. Bossler, that the devil will be in the details. You haven't seen the trailer bill language because we haven't written it yet. And that I think this suggestion of disagreement will be clarified in that we do not have any intent of undermining the flexibility which is native to local control funding formula, and that this is just to augment that which you're already proposing.
Yes, and I've been a little bit quiet the last three items, but I mean, the last three items really are based on the higher LAO revenues,
Yes, it is.
which we really cannot support at this time. And I was going to save my comments to the second to last page, but just want to underscore that since it's very germane to this discussion here.
Right, no, and we will get to it before we conclude our work today, but one could ask, where is all this new money coming from above and beyond? Of course, this is all on the 98 side of the budget, but it is coming from, I believe the number is approximately correct, about $2.5 billion additional dollars for education as a result of accepting the LAO's higher numbers. So that is a pot of money that we think should be reinvested in our educational system, but we'll be getting to that shortly. So we have a motion from Senator Block. If there are no other questions, we do have public comment. If you could keep it as brief as possible, we'd appreciate it. We'll applaud you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and members. Jeff Baca with the California Association of School Business Officials, specifically expressing support for the home to school portion of the proposal. And thank you, Senator Block, for your comments. It is an equity issue, and this would help address that historic inequity. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Andrea Ball for the California School Boards Association, also just speaking in strong support of the home to school transportation funding, and our former member, Senator Block, was much more eloquent than I could be, so thank you.
He always is.
Good afternoon. Marta Lord, San Diego Unified School District. San Diego Unified's position has been all along that any new ongoing money should be placed into the LCFF. So we appreciate the Senate's committee support and recommendation to put $330 million for LCFF. However, we have also been in a position that any one-time money should be dedicated to pay off part of the wall of debt, which is mandates. So in terms of the LCFF, we would just suggest that instead of allocating $150 million of the $330 million for CTE, to please reconsider and just allocate it as LCFF, more flexible money that we can use for our programs, not just CTE, but other requests that we have. And Senator Block, thank you for your comments. One acknowledgement about STIRS. We have other liabilities to fulfill. Thank you.
Thank you.
Liz Guillen with Public Advocates. Obviously, very happy about any additional support under LCFF, but the quote, the flexibility of it, or what color it actually is really important if we want LCFF to remain an equity formula. With the obligations under STIRS, it's a real concern to us that districts would be using the funds they might be using to increase or improve services for low-income students, foster youth, and English learners to pay off that obligation. So we would hope that there would be a strong suggestion or sentiment expressed that not occur, that however flexible these funds are, the improvement or increase in services to high-needs students still needs to occur as if this hadn't happened, this new obligation hadn't come up. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, Sarah Lillis with Ed Voice, and want to echo the comments from public advocates and just highlight the importance then of transparency to make sure that the local community has information about how this money is actually being spent and where it's coming from. Thank you.
Very good. Thank you. No other public comment? We have a motion. Please call the roll.
Leno?
Aye.
Nielsen?
No.
Anderson?
Aye.
Bell?
Aye.
Berryhill? Block?
Aye.
Corbett? Hancock?
Aye.
Jackson? Aye. Liu? Mitchell? Aye. Monning?
Aye.
Morrell? Roth?
Aye.
Torres? Wyland?
Corbett, aye.
Corbett, aye. That's 10-1.
10-1, the motion passes. Moving on to our deferral buy-downs.
An important part of the governor's budget was the continued pay down of the state's wall of debt, and that included a large piece that is we were able to retire here in the K-14 area related to the inter-year deferrals of about $6.2 billion.
And this will eliminate them entirely?
Eliminate them entirely. So.
Did you have some deliberations as to whether cost-benefit analysis to different types of districts between completely eliminating the deferrals this year or stretching it for another year?
I think that the governor's budget focus was really about, paying down the liabilities that we could within the Prop 98 guarantee, and this was certainly a high priority item, realizing that some districts are going to be more benefited more than others, but I can't say we did a district by district analysis on that.
Very good.